Hello, this is Ruben. We are here continuing our podcast. I have
Jose?
so we are a podcast um, called Men Redefining Manhood. So welcome to Men Redefining Manhood, a podcast and movement for fathers and men ready to rewrite what it means to be men. This isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about healing, not hiding. It's about building men up, not tearing each other down. Let's redefine manhood together.
Yeah, and I think that, Ruben, that speaks a lot to, what our intentions are as far as like exposing, other men to changes that can be made, right? Uh, Instead of falling into that ascribed role as a man. Um, and so last week we talked about, you know, changing generational patterns, right? Breaking patterns that, have been handed down from generation after generation, and maybe feeling obligated, to continue with those behaviors out of loyalty to our culture or to our family. Um, and so if you guys haven't seen that podcast, feel free to check it out. I think it's a great podcast, very informative. I'm sure you'll gain something from it. Um, this podcast is going to be about for
Emotions. So today's podcast, we're going to speak about how emotions in men are not signs of weakness. So if you viewed our last week's episode, I got very vulnerable with everybody. I cried, which can be challenging for a lot of us men. Showing that side of emotion, not allowing our minds and the norm of us men thinking that showing emotion, crying is a weakness. To me, I've learned to get out of that cycle because growing up, I was raised in that. I was raised in los hombres no lloran, men don't cry. We're not supposed to show any kind of weakness that makes us look vulnerable, makes us look weak. I've gotten to the feeling and understanding that I can't bury my emotions anymore. I can't, because when I did, it brought up anger, it brought up resentment, it brought up, risky behavior, it brought up a lot of negative stuff that I was doing, drinking, doing stuff that I shouldn't be doing. So I've learned that now that when I let go of these emotions and I cry and I sit in the uncomfortable, I feel the weight of it leave.
Yeah.
Which was very hard for me at first.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you would think, right, that at least from my experience, you would think that your mom being a woman or a female or someone with more compassion and care would normalize, right, the expression of emotions. But yet even them, I remember growing up, and if it wasn't my dad, it was my mom telling me, if you cry, I'm going to give you something to cry for, and this is something coming from a mom as well, right? And I don't blame her for it. I think it was more of the mentality and the tradition and the culture, right, that conditioned people to think, whether they were men or women, to think that men shouldn't cry, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the reality. You bring up a very good point. When you don't express emotion, one way or another, your body's going to find an outlet, whether it's through alcohol, whether it's through violence, right? Whether it's self-destruction in general, right? Getting into drugs, attempting to take your life, right? Projecting your feelings onto other people, or, lashing out at your loved ones, all because, you have it so bottled up in you that it somehow needs to escape. and unfortunately ends up escaping, or you project it onto those that you love.
Yeah. And for me, it was, doing a lot of risky stuff. I caught myself at a point in life where I was drinking every day. And it wasn't, a beer here and there. It was like a glass of whiskey a night. And I noticed that it became a drowning session when I was sitting in the dark drinking whiskey. And I was like, this ain't good. So I even tried to, get out of that and got into like fitness and health and stuff like that. And I found myself going to the gym 2-3 times a day. And that feeling was still there. Like, my body was super sore. I was feeling the change. I seen the changes in my body. I felt the soreness. But those emotional feelings of anger and sadness and resentment and everything was still there.
Sure.
Because it was a cultural thing where in my household it was los hombres no lloran, men don't cry, but also just the overall atmosphere of emotions was never really addressed. Like, I recall a lot of incidents where I felt an emotion of sadness, fear, anxiety. I had nobody to talk to about it, even my own mother.
Right.
And that caused me to have a lot of anger and even more frustration about it. Like, what do I do with this emotion? And I did all kinds of dumb stuff that I shouldn't have done. And, it affected a lot of not only myself, but my household, my family, my small family that I was raising, how I treated my son, how I treated my wife. And I needed to find a different outlet. So, I went to therapy, which some of us guys, I think we all should do. But, just finding inner peace, finding what's really going on. How can I overcome this? How can I solve this? And, also getting closer to my faith, which I kind of drew away from. There's a lot of stuff a lot of internal work that I had to do on myself.
Yes.
And really be okay with being in the uncomfortable, which was very hard for me. And that's why, I want to start, that's why we started this, because this podcast, I believe that there's a lot of men also going out there dealing with these same aspects in life. And if we don't talk about it, we don't bring up these situations, how many other men are going to go through this and may not overcome it,
Yeah.
I had a brother years ago that committed suicide because of not having an outlet. I know that he was dealing with some mental health stuff, and not finding a proper outlet for it.
Yeah. And if we look at society, right, and we look at the patterns that exist, right, the majority of people out there, right, when we look, for example, let's look at mass shooters, right, mass shootings, they're all men.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't seen one woman that has done a mass shooting.
Yeah.
They're all men. Murder suicides, they're all men.
Yeah. 80 something. What I think it's like 86 or 83% or something like that is men.
Right. And when they interview neighbors, what do neighbors say? But he was a nice guy.
Yeah.
Right? From what you saw.
Yeah.
The person didn't express, right,
Yeah.
what they were going through, how they were feeling, right?
Yeah.
So that's why you never got to see the side of the vulnerable side of that person,
Well, like I had brought it up last week. I seen in in our city we have AV scanner where they kind of put everything. I finally did get the guts up to be able to read it, because my emotions I've been so comfortable within my emotions, especially around any topics around sons, kids, all that kind of stuff. With my son being gone at college, my array of emotions are everywhere. I finally was able to read the situation where the 23-year-old kid, took his life outside of Schooners. The dad wrote something on there, and in the writing of it, he was saying there was no signs, there was no red flags, he was a happy kid, You know, he had a good job. Like, I didn't get it. I didn't understand. But that so strongly shows that how much us men are good at bearing that emotion.
Yeah.
Hiding it.
Yeah.
Like, let's look at a lot of the famous people that have taken their lives.
Sure.
Robert Williams, right?
Absolutely.
He had a video that came out prior to him taking his own life, talking about, you know, people reaching out, getting the support they need, and then he ended up killing himself.
Yeah. So, and for example, right, just recently there was a boxer that killed himself, Ricky Hatton, right? So he was an athlete, successful at his craft, you know, a champion, right? And people would think, right, oh, he's successful, right? And this is where there's that misconception, right? That a lot of people think that because you're successful, because you're fit, because you've acquired, you know, wealth, and you have, you know, what, that you must be okay inside. Right? But those are perfect examples, right, of people that have been very successful, financially well off, and yet they've lost their battle, right, to depression, right? And so, yeah, you know, expressing our emotions is very important. We need to be in a place of feeling vulnerable, right? We need to be able to allow ourselves to be okay, to show emotion, whether it's happy, whether it's sadness, whether it's frustration, whether it's anger. It's okay to show it. Show it in a good way, right? It's okay to cry. Like, there's nothing wrong with crying. And this is what, you know, this is, I think, what I think is important for people to hear too, right? That, and I might have mentioned this before, right? Crying is a natural process of the body, right? So when we try to suppress that, it's like saying, you know what? For my car to run, it needs the four wheels, but I'm going to take one of them off and expect it to work the same way. It's not gonna happen, right? It's not. You'll probably get around the corner, and then before you know it, that's it, right? Or a little bit, and then car falls over, dips down, right? And that's the way we are, right? That at some point in time, right, we can remove our emotion, we can suppress it, but at some point in time, we're gonna fall. You know, we're gonna find ourselves in a deeper hole, struggling and so forth. You know, and so. Yeah, emotion is, I think it's important, you know. I myself have been feeling emotional as well, just like you mentioned, you know, because, you know, my son went to the military, and it's a transition, you know. You don't expect that transition to be the way it is. I mean, as I was telling my wife, I said, you know what, it's a loss, you know, like your son is there, and the next day he's not. And even though you know he's alive, his presence is absent, right? And so having to deal with that adjustment is very difficult, you know, as a parent, you know. And just like you know, it's interesting because you know, I'm scrolling and I'm going through social media and stuff, and then things that I'm seeing, like about the military and about sons, and I'm like, swipe.
No, thank you.
Like, not today, you know, not right now, you know, like, let me go ahead and just, why? Because, you know, there's pain attached to that, right? And in that moment, it makes it very difficult and unbearable to want to confront it, right? But then what happens? Then eventually, you know, my emotions get the best of me, and it happens, you know. Like the other day I was crying, you know, and I was like, what the hell? Like, man, like wow, this is harder than I thought, you know. And my wife feels the same way, you know. She's like, wow, like I never thought that this would be this difficult, you know, and it is, you know. And so being in that type of relationship too has been very helpful, you know, when you're in a relationship where when you and your partner or you and your spouse can share the same sentiment, free of judgment, free of criticism, and for both parties to feel safe doing it, right? And at the same time be able to lend that support to each other during that moment, because it can be unbearable at times, right?
Yeah. I know, it's to the point where if my younger daughter goes to our son's room and leaves the door open, because sometimes she'll go in there just to go in there, and she'll get a and I'm like, so what are you doing? So I'll go try to close the door and stuff like that. And sometimes it'll get the best of me, and I'll start crying. My wife's like, "What's wrong?" And I'll have that conversation with her, and she's like, "Yeah, it's understandable, but we have to remember too, our son is good. We've done an amazing job." And I think that's the hardest part, because I read something recently that talked about us as parents teach our kids to grow up without us, but what about us? How do we teach ourselves to grow up as well and do without them? Because eventually they're going to be, I think about it a lot recently. My son, eventually he's going to have his own family, want to move on and do all that kind of stuff, and it's like, it's hard thinking of that. But, we also have to be mindful, and I've been trying to reflect a lot and think, who's the man that I raised?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it goes back to last week's topic, breaking that generational curse. I see a lot of the new version of him, seeing what he wants to do and how he wants to improve and how he wants to, kind of go through life. We recently talked about kids and stuff, and I'm like, whoa, slow down a little bit.
Pump your brakes, hold on.
Pump your brakes. He's like, no, Dad. He's like, I want to finish school and I want to do all this. He's like, I want to be a young parent like you, because you and Mom, you guys did good with me. He's like, I think you guys did good, very good with me, Excuse me. He's like, I'm very proud of the family that I've come from, but I also want to branch out and do all these things, Dad. I'm like, okay. He's like, but I see, what you've done, and I wanna role model some of that, Dad. Like, I want to be a good dad. I want to do the stuff early, get it within early of my field, kind of what we talked about last week too. He's like, I want to get in early and try to be more successful at a sooner age, so that way I do have the flexibility of having time to be there for my kids, just like how you and Mom have managed to, have great careers and also be there for me,
Yeah.
He's like, it's awesome what you guys have done. I'm like, "Do my kid like, you trying to make me cry or what?"
Yeah,
He's like, "No, Dad." He's like, I'm thinking of what the future holds, and I'm like, okay.
It's interesting, right? Like how they see the upside to the situation, and we as parents, we might see the downside to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're seeing the confidence, which is amazing. That's great, right? Because we as parents, we have a lot to do with that, right?
Yeah.
For our kids to be able to take off and say, you know what, I can do this, in in whatever capacity, and be confident about it. That's great, right? And that's what they see, right? But on our end, it's like we become so focused on our emotions and managing our emotions that what we see, and I think it's just the natural side of being a parent, right, is the fear of no longer being that protector, right? And learning to let go and learning to trust that, they're going to make good choices and they're going to succeed in their own way, right?
When you say that, I think of social media, because I see these posts that talk about it, especially when I recently went to school. One of the ones that I kept seeing was, it's like, Mom, it was like a clip, and it said, "Mom, why are you crying? Like, I'm going to college. This is, what you wanted me to do."
Yeah.
But it was like, and it was Mom, but I'm thinking too, like, what about us dads too?
Yeah.
Like, we go through that emotion as well. And it showed a picture of him as a child. She's like, I still see this little kid. And for me, I do. I visualize when I see my son. Me and my wife, she just showed me a picture last night of our son 15 years ago. He was only 3, and I'm like, Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's who I still see, you know what I mean? Like, even when he calls or when he texts, I still see that younger version of him. And again, I want to be that protective factor, but I also have to understand who's the man that I created. Who's the man that we helped mold to be, and God helped us as well. Create the young man that I have now. you know, and it's hard because we're so used to being. I've been his protective factor for 18 years, and now it's like now I'm supposed to let go. Now I'm supposed to be
okay, and yeah, go for it. Yeah, yeah.
and
So it's a process, right? It is. It's a process, and it's a process that brings about strong emotions. You know, that test you. They really test you, right? Like they put you in very vulnerable positions, and you know, and you got to be okay with feeling that way. You have to just allow yourself to feel that way. And I remember my son telling me, when he was leaving, I became it's interesting, right? Because I became teary-eyed, right? And he saw that in me, and first thing my son said was, he's all like, Dad, he's all like, you broke before Mom, right? And I told him, I said, yeah, and I said, and it's okay, right? So even, right, like even my son has that expectation, and society still has that expectation that men shouldn't show weakness, right? And that's not what we've shown our kids, right? Like what we've shown our kids is to be emotionally expressive and to allow themselves to feel and to allow themselves to cry if they have to. But coming from him, right, it just made me realize, like, wow, like there was a comparison made, right? Like because my wife's the woman, it was acceptable for her to cry, and it was expected for her to cry first. But when it was me, it was almost looked at as, oh, that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, that's not the norm.
That's not the norm. Like, what's going on, right? So I took the opportunity to tell my son, no. I said, son, I said, it's okay. I said, this is the way I feel, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like at some point in time, if you feel like you need to, let out your emotions, or you need to, don't feel that you can't. I said, because as your own person, you have every right to, being a man or whatever, like everybody has that right to,
Yeah. I know. Every time I think of emotion, I think of, like, I think we talked about it 2 podcasts ago. That video of Canelo, the famous boxer, where he tells this kid, one of his guys there is telling his son, no, he's getting ready. The sons are getting ready to cry because they hit him or something, and the guy's like, yeah, no, you're not supposed to cry. You're not supposed to cry. He's like, whoa, don't tell my kid like he can't cry, like. And he goes and tells him, he's like, no, son, if you ever feel emotion, if you ever feel hurt, if you ever feel, this type of way where your emotions are, it's okay to cry. And coming from a very prideful man that is, very prideful in our Hispanic Mexican culture, to say something like that was like the awe, like what? Because it's not the norm,
right?
Of,
Again,
of
right?
us
Another
showing,
successful athlete,
yeah,
right? Like
showing that
probably,
emotion.
yeah, and probably his strength. His strength is measured through his boxing abilities, right? And all the championships and everything, right? As opposed to his strength being measured by, being okay with being vulnerable.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, right? Like it's absolutely, it's acceptable and it's okay.
It's something that stood out to me a lot. I was like, wow, okay. I'm like, okay. I'm like, this super prideful champion of the champions who I look at can cry, then it's okay for me to cry. It's okay for me to show emotion, and
Absolutely.
it's like I'm okay with being vulnerable now. I know that it's not a weakness. For me, I feel that as a strength, because through those emotions, I feel like I've grown closer with my son. I've grown closer with my family. I've grown closer with my wife, my daughter. It makes me feel okay with myself. When before it was like kind of shameful. Like, you shouldn't cry. Remember what your dad said. Like, los hombres no lloran, men don't cry. But it's like, no. I'm okay with who I am and where I'm at now.
And you know what? I think I think it also, and this is, and hopefully, this makes total sense for our listeners. But, when you allow that side of you to take place, right? You free yourself, and you bring yourself to a level of peace, right? When you're able to, express your emotion, you feel lighter. You feel like you've unpacked that backpack that you've been carrying for years, and you never again want to carry that backpack. You want to just, like, I'm okay where I'm at, because just like you, I remember, growing up, I bottled up my emotions, and when my parents were divorcing, and seeing their conflict and everything, right? Like, I was so angry, because they lied to me, right? The way they divorced and what I was told, thinking my dad was in Mexico on vacation, when in reality they had separated, or they were going through a divorce, right? And that brought a lot of anger, to me, because I felt betrayed by my own parents, right? Like, the people that you're supposed to trust, all of a sudden you find out lied to you, And because I was taught not to cry, I wouldn't say anything to them. I wouldn't. But what would I do? I would fight. I was quick. I was quick to find opportunities, if it was at school, if it was wherever. I was constantly running on the fight or flight type of response. And oftentimes it was more of the fight response, right? Like, anybody looked at you, like, you addressed it quickly, right? And then, not to mention the environment that I come from, Los Angeles, Westlake District, gang involved environments, right? Part of survival was, you needed to step up, and, you needed to let people know, like, listen, like, I'm not a pushover, right? Yeah. So it came with that, and it just exacerbated the behavior. It's like, now I really, even though I have a reason to feel this way, now I really have another reason to really let it out this way.
Yeah,
and it wasn't the healthy way to go.
You're like, this is the way of protecting myself.
Yeah, it wasn't the healthy way to go. It was what you knew, but was it okay? Was it? No, it wasn't. You still felt the same way afterwards. You even felt worse afterwards, knowing that, you got yourself involved into a problem that could have been avoided, or you got hurt, or you hurt someone for no reason, just because it just didn't make sense, right? And then comes around the learning of expression of emotion, being vulnerable, and understanding, obviously, right through my education and through my career, understanding that, wait a minute, according to who and where does it say it, that a man cannot be emotionally expressive? Right? There isn't anything written or any law that says you can't, right? Rather, it's created. And when I figured out, like, wait a minute, this was created, and it was created by society, it was created by my culture, then why can't I just create who I want to be, how I want to feel, how I want to express myself, right? And from there forward, it was just very different, just being very open, expressing my emotions, being okay, allowing myself to cry, allowing myself to feel upset, to be sad, be able to let people know that I'm not okay in the moment, right? And it creates a world of a difference, right, when you do that, because before you know it, you're not alone. Yeah. When people come to realize that, you're feeling sad or you're feeling down, people actually, you'll come to realize that there's actually people there willing to support you and help you in that moment. And that's amazing.
Yeah. Just like when I reached out to you sincerely, because,
yeah,
I know our situations are not the same, but I feel like our last topic that we talked about last week, we need to be there for each other. We need to be, as men, we need to be united. Like,
absolutely.
I was just at my daughter's dance recital last week, and I remember sitting there and hearing some of the ladies talk there, and they're like talking about like personal stuff, and I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, okay, but that's their norm,
Yeah, exactly.
and our norm is to not, you know.
Talk about
And
personal.
I could see there's
Talk
a
about
guy there,
sports
he's
or
like,
whatever.
you know, kind of like reserved, and I was like, hey, what's up, man? He's like, hey. I was like, dang, this is such a different dynamic for me. I was even expressing how I felt about it. I was like, you know, I'm used to being in an environment with my son. Like, you know, I was like, I have
Sports and so
I have an 18-year-old that I'm going from varsity basketball to now dance class.
Yeah.
Like, this feels so,
Yeah.
you know, so weird. So being vulnerable in the sense of that too, like.
Absolutely.
And he's like, yeah. He's like, I didn't think of that. He's like, it is a little weird, huh? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I love it, man. I love being able to be here for her and be a supportive parent. He's like, yeah, this is cool. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So being vulnerable in the sense of that too, and looking at the difference, you know.
Yes.
Why is it okay for women to be comfortable with being so expressive, and us men kind of not really saying something, even though we could feel the uncomfortableness.
Right. But that's
and
the only way to make it comfortable, though, right?
Yeah,
The only
is
way to make
addressing
it
it.
comfortable is addressing it and actually practicing being uncomfortable and being open, right?
Yeah.
Because, like you mentioned, right, it's that vulnerability and that fear of being criticized, being judged, that creates that barrier for us. Excuse me. In being able to be open and talk about our emotions, right?
And that's something that I always did it, not just sharing emotions, but not putting myself out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's something that I'm like, no, I need to be different. Like, maybe there's other people out there dealing with same situations I'm dealing with, and
Sure.
in my line of work too, I met so many guys and teens as well, you know, teen boys and stuff, and hearing some of their stuff and just talking to them and trying to teach them, like, hey, no, we got to be different. Like, there's different out there. You know, we can't just subside and say, oh, this is the way, this is the norm, this is the culture that I'm in anyway. So no, just because that norm is okay, look, that you gotta be like you, gotta be different, gotta be, say, hey, no, like, enough is enough. I can't continue to raise myself like this, because it's just gonna lead to even more destructive thinking and behaviors, and then the outcome, you know, be a part of the 80-something% where us men don't make it out because we didn't want to talk about what was really going on with us.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have to be okay with be okay with creating those environments and opportunities, right? Where, like, maybe like having like a coffee session, you know, where men get together, you know, once a week or every couple weeks, right? Have some coffee and just openly chat and talk about life and talk about, you know, like daily stressors, and, you know, as a healthy outlet, right? To just you know, vent and create opportunity for healthy expression, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I was just talking to my barber about that. I told him this last week. I was like, I mentioned you last week in the podcast thing that I'm doing, and he's like, okay. And I was telling him, I was like, yeah, we need to have more of an outlet. You know, maybe we can going getting coffee, doing, you know, getting together as guys and just talking about guy stuff, talking about what we go through. And he's like, that's badass, bro. He's like, I'll be down for that. He's like, I'd really look forward to that, because he's like, we have deep conversations, and he's like, you know, we have a lot of similarities, and he's like, you know, I'd like to hear from other guys too, and what they're going through, because, you know, he's like, I carry a lot of heavy too. Yeah. I said, yeah, we gotta talk about this. We have to become the new norm of normalizing this, and it's. I kind of feel that this is why this podcast came together, for us to eventually, you know, hopefully,
to create acceptance, right?
Yeah.
Of the expression of emotion, right?
Yeah.
Instead of shying away from it. So.
Yes. We need it very, very much. Because the loss is too heavy out there for a lot of guys that aren't expressing what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You know, it's a heavy burden to carry. You know, when you feel that you're alone, and in reality you're not, but you feel that you're alone because you don't feel that you can express yourself and let those around you know that you're not okay.
Yep.
Right? And so people assume, right? People assume, like, this young man that took his life not so long ago, right? The 23-year-old you mentioned, right? Like, people assumed that he was okay because he didn't express himself, and even though he had family and his dad was there, and people, I mean, we don't know the whole story, right? But there was clearly people around there. There was a lot of friends and so forth. He was actually with friends that in that moment, right?
Yeah.
Out when it occurred, and yet nobody knew, right? Because, you know, it wasn't something that was shared. Maybe he felt like it wasn't appropriate or whatnot, or people weren't going to help or listen.
Embarrassed,
right?
ashamed.
Yeah,
There's a lot
but
of
the
people.
reality is that, you know, if you take a moment as a man to be vulnerable for a second, and just let somebody close to you know, like, hey man, you know what, I'm struggling, I'm not doing okay, right? People are willing to listen. People are willing to take a moment to check in on you and figure out how they can help, you know. But if you don't say anything, then people don't know, you know.
Yeah, I think my going to the barber has been a kind of therapy session for me, but also helping my barber as well, because we have a lot of similarities and a lot of stuff that we talk about, you know, comes up, and it's a lot of me sometimes like overthinking, like, should I be feeling like this? Because, you know, I've been having a lot of challenges with my family, and they're intense and how they do certain things. We talk about it. He has a similar situation, so I'm like, am I wrong for thinking this way? And he's like, no, bro. He's like, the thing is that you've gotten to the state where you think different, and not only that, you're a good guy, man. He's like, that's why you overthink it, because, you know, they're in the wrong, but you're legitimately a good guy, and your feelings are behind it, your emotions are behind it, and they're valid. And it's good to hear that.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like, okay. I'm like, okay. So it's been interesting, and we've talked about a lot about the podcast. I started a group. I told them that I want to start a group maybe weekly or bi-weekly, where some guys get together and kind of just have open discussion.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that would be a great idea, you know, because, you know, I don't know that is something that is practiced often. You know, people usually get together for barbecues and so forth,
Yeah.
right? And you know, but to say, you know
Drink
what?
and-
Yeah, drink and
Then we kind of let loose and have a conversation. But
yeah, right.
Can we
That's
also,
what brings your guard down, right? You have a
Yeah.
few drinks and whatnot, and all of a sudden, right, the emotions flow, and it's like, why can't emotions flow without having to take that step, right? Without having to go down that direction, right? Coffee, or just have some lunch or something, you know, and just have conversations and really just, you know, for everybody to just share, you know, what their week's been like, what life has been like, and so forth. You know, I think that's a great way to go. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, man, good conversation. You know, very, very, very. I think it was a very, very insightful, you know, conversation, and hopefully this podcast is beneficial to our listeners. You know, and that you find some value in it, and somehow, some way can relate to our experiences. Again, we're going to continue to have these podcasts for the sake of helping other men out there, right? Get into the zone of feeling comfortable and normal when it comes to expressing emotions. So we will be having you know, another podcast as well. And I want to say that, is it the next podcast that we'll be having somebody join in us, or is it not the next one but the following one?
I want to say maybe the following one.
Okay.
'Cause, you know, I know that I have a few people. I know that you have a few people. I did reach out to somebody earlier today that I thought would be a good fit, but he has a huge platform, so I don't know. I just threw myself out there, being vulnerable. Threw myself out there. I met this guy a long time ago, so I don't know if he'd be up to it. I know that he's busy till like the end of the year. He's a comedian, an actor.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Some guy that's kind of local. But yeah, I don't know. I think we need to kind of sit together and see who would like to, and kind of go from there.
Yeah. So, just so you guys know, our intention is to bring other men on board and to have a conversation with us, and for us to just talk about our experiences as men, and look at other men's perspectives into how they view life, being a man, being a husband or a father, right? And maybe what are some of the struggles and similarities and or differences that we share as men, and having a productive conversation around that, so that we can all have a better understanding as to where we stand, and what we can learn from it as well. So yeah, so stay tuned, and then we'll be having again, stay tuned to our next podcast. Our next podcast, will be focused on. Do we have a specific topic that we have in mind so far, or are we still we're gonna continue with just the themes
Just
that
kind
we've been having?
just kind of continue with the path. We don't have a specific topic right now, but I'm pretty sure something will come up between us, and kind of go from there.
Yeah. So just consider it a surprise, guys.
Yeah.
Consider it a surprise, but we can guarantee you that it's going to be good. It'll be very informational. It'll be helpful. So just stay tuned, and we hope to see you guys during the next podcast, and we'll take it from there. Okay, you guys have a great day, and we look forward to catching up with you guys next time around.
Yeah. Thank you for watching our videos as well, and we look forward to hearing from some of you hopefully soon once we put our complete platform out there. Okay? Thank you. Have a great day. Stop.
We can.